Your peacekeepers are already dead. That was the first sentence the alien general broadcasted across the stars just seconds before the transmission switched from negotiation room footage to a live feed of burning bodies piled on Blackstone. Earth's highest-ranking diplomats, unarmed and cloaked in white emblems of neutrality, were being incinerated in real time while their killers laughed in the galactic assembly where over 70 species met to uphold peace. The silence was so thick it choked. No words, no protest. Not even a lizard-faced Varn emissary known for screaming over protocol violations dared to blink. Earth had been mocked before, labeled a relic civilization too obsessed with restraint and diplomacy. But this was different. This was a public execution, a deliberate, calculated humiliation designed to show the galaxy that Earth was soft, weak. On Earth, chaos rippled across every screen. News anchors stuttered, protests erupted. Hundreds of thousands gathered outside the unified defense parliament. Some waving Earth flags, others holding signs that read, "Bring him back." And by him, they didn't mean a general or politician. They meant the last weapon Earth buried, the one man they swore never to awaken. Deep beneath the Rockies, under layers of reinforced alloy and dead zones shielded from satellites, was a crypt no one talked about. Only 4 people on Earth still had access. 2 were in Parliament. One was a reclusive ex-scientist living in orbit. The 4th, a senator named Kira Dean, stood trembling in the shadows of a war council chamber, watching the footage of peacekeepers being slaughtered again and again on repeat. Her jaw clenched. She didn't weep, she didn't curse. She just muttered a name no one else dared say aloud, Arden Pierce. When she finally spoke in session, the room scoffed before she finished her sentence. Activate the relic. That was all she said. The Supreme Commander laughed through his nose, calling it childish desperation. Another general asked if she also believed in ghosts and ancient dragons. The defense chairwoman made a joke about unlocking tombs and plagues, but no one was laughing 10 minutes later, when DM produced an access code so old that the Central Security AI didn't recognize it as Earth-based. The lights in the room flickered as every secure channel across the council chamber surged. The relic was real, and he was still alive. A team was dispatched at dawn. Not soldiers, not Marines, just 2 people, a clearance-level diplomat and a young comms technician barely older than 22, who was included only because he could still read PI terminal code fluently. They rode in a stealth skimmer across mountain ridges older than humanity's first starflight. The entry point was a cave mouth half swallowed by a landslide marked only by a dying pine. The diplomat didn't hesitate. The technician nearly wet himself when the cave wall blinked at him, an ancient biometric scanner hid in the rock. An entire cliff side groaned open. They descended into silence. No lights, no echoes, just temperature sensors and bio readings whispering through the technician's earpiece. The air was cold, heavy, and smelled faintly of copper and ozone. At the core, they found a single room. No windows, no controls, just a sealed pod with frost clinging to its surface and warning labels in a dozen Earth languages. The name etched into the metal wasn't serial code. It was a phrase. Do not open under any circumstance without global consent. The technician looked pale. The diplomat stared for 10 seconds and then inserted the data spike. The machine hissed like it was breathing for the first time in centuries. The pod's walls retracted with a sound like ice shattering. Inside lay a man, not ancient, not weathered, not monstrous, just still. His hair was gray at the edges but black at the core. His face bore a scar over one eye and a line of old burns down his neck. He didn't move for several seconds. Then, without opening his eyes, he spoke, first in Latin, then in Old English, then perfect Earth Standard. His voice was soft, dangerous. He asked one question. Who did you lose? The diplomat answered without pause. Our peacekeepers, the Cygnus Assembly, executed by the generals of the Triform Accord publicly. He said nothing in response, just sat up slowly, every movement precise like he was remembering how bones worked. He glanced around the chamber, stretched his fingers, and murmured something under his breath. The technician thought it sounded like, "They buried me for this." The diplomat nodded once, saying, "The galaxy laughed at us. We buried war and they burned peace." Arden finally opened his eyes. One was a faded blue, the other cybernetic, blinked with red tracking light. He smiled, and it wasn't kind. Back at the surface, news of his awakening hadn't been shared. Parliament was still trying to cover up the fact that their classified tomb had opened, but Earth's enemies? They had satellites. The moment the black site emitted power for the first time in 200 years, alien listening posts lit up. One of the alien generals, the same one who had beheaded Earth's lead ambassador, reportedly stared at the readings for several minutes and muttered a single phrase before scrambling for security reinforcements. Not him. Not again. Arden's first request wasn't for his ship or armor or weapons. It was for his dog tags, the ones with 7 symbols engraved in the steel, each one marking a war Earth had sworn to forget. When the tags were handed to him, he scratched a new symbol onto the edge. The diplomat asked what it meant. Arden shrugged. That's for what comes next. He stood, fully dressed now in black fatigues and combat boots that looked freshly printed despite being designed before most of the galaxy had spaceflight. The technician made the mistake of asking what they should call him in front of the press. Arden didn't answer right away. He just stared out the exit hatch where dawn was rising over the Rockies, silent and golden. Then he said, "You don't, because if they hear my name, they'll run. If they don't, they'll burn. Either way, I don't want them calling me anything until they regret it." And just like that Earth's last buried soldier walked into the sunlight, not as a hero, not as a relic, but as a storm returned from the dead. The mountain air was thinner than Arden remembered, but it tasted real, not filtered or recycled like in the cryopod. He walked like he'd never forgotten how. Each step measured, his boots pressing into gravel with that distinct, deliberate weight of someone who didn't just move, but controlled every space he entered. The technician trailed behind him nervously, carrying a portable tablet linked to Parliament. The diplomat stayed silent, knowing better than to interrupt Arden's re-entry into a world that had tried so hard to erase him. As they reached the landing pad carved into cliffs, a sleek black shuttle hummed with idle power, its entrance already open, guards flanking the side with nervous eyes. Not a single one saluted. Inside the shuttle, Arden was handed a plain black case, no insignia, no warnings, but the way he opened it gently and with something close to reverence suggested it held more than equipment. Inside was armor unlike anything modern Earth forces used. Heavy plates with carbon mesh lacing, glove ports wired into pulse-reactive gauntlets, a chest plate embedded with magnetic holsters for ancient blade carbines. It was war-forged before Earth joined the Galactic Assembly. It was illegal now and outlawed for a reason. When Arden slipped into it, the armor hissed, adjusted and pulsed like a second skin remembering its host. The room's temperature sensors began to spike. One of the guards swallowed hard. Arden simply clipped his dog tags over the breastplate and stood still as the diplomat scanned his vitals. As the shuttle lifted into the clouds, Arden remained standing, staring at the curvature of Earth through the wide viewport. Cities glowed softly below, peaceful, unaware. His reflection stared back at him from the glass, not with nostalgia or longing but calculation. The technician nervously spoke up, saying Parliament wanted to debrief him before authorizing any form of retaliation. Arden didn't turn. He just asked if Parliament had voted to avenge the peacekeepers yet. The technician said, "No." Arden nodded then. "They have no business debriefing me." The diplomat chuckled softly under her breath. She didn't disagree. Landing at the orbital command station above Earth, Arden was greeted not by applause or ceremony, but by silence and caution. The station's general, an aging man with polished metals and a practiced posture, stepped forward and extended a hand. Arden looked at it, then passed it, as if the gesture itself was irrelevant. The general stiffened and tried again, this time with words, welcoming him back and offering strategic command resources. Arden cut him off by walking past. In the control room, screen showed live footage from Cygnus 3, the site of the Peacekeeper executions. The alien generals were parading through local city sectors, boasting of their conquest. One image showed a human child holding a sign that read, "Bring him back." Arden stopped at that. For the first time since waking, his face showed something besides quiet fury. He stared at the image for several seconds before muttering, "Tell command, I need access to orbital salvage. I'm not using your new toys." Parliament's private line crackled to life. The chairwoman's voice, sharp and condescending, filled the room, thanking him for his service and insisting that any action needed full interstellar consensus. Arden didn't even glance at the speaker. He said one sentence. If consensus could stop bullets, your peacekeepers wouldn't be ash. The line went dead. Arden's first mission wasn't to assemble a force or rally troops. It was to find his old ship. The Leviathan-class stealth cruiser named Hollower had been decommissioned and buried in Earth's orbital scrapyard decades ago, reduced to a husk of its former glory. It took Arden 4 hours to locate it, 2 hours to override AI, and 20 minutes to make it fly again. The ship roared to life with a guttural hum that made the scrapyard tremble. The engineer he brought with him, a woman named Sol with a sharp tongue and a prosthetic leg, watched in awe as systems booted that hadn't run since before she was born. Arden didn't explain much to her, just pointed to things and fixed others. She grinned, realizing quickly he didn't need her to pilot. He needed her to keep the engine from exploding. The translator joined last, a fresh-faced linguist from Mars Colony who spoke 5 galactic dialects but had never been off-world. Arden tested him with one sentence, in a dead warrior tongue from a collapsed empire. The translator blinked and answered perfectly. Arden gave him a single nod. Good enough. When the Hollow Star disengaged from the scrapyard and slipped into deep space, Earth Command issued a formal disavowal. They labeled it a rogue action and denied involvement. Arden smiled when he read the statement. It was exactly what he needed. Silence bought him time. Official distance bought him freedom. Out in the dark stretches of neutral space, Arden moved with precision. He tracked the first General Voth, commander of the Triform Accord, by intercepting his fleet resupply transmissions. Voth had grown arrogant since the executions. He was hosting banquets and giving interviews, calling Earth's response slow and cowardly. Arden didn't respond with threats. He responded with silence. He charted a course for Kelzer Prime, a heavily fortified city planet where Voth was headquartered. The ship's AI warned him of suicide odds. So asked if he had a real plan. Arden answered by opening a weapons crate filled with tech outlawed by the Galactic Assembly, including a gravity spear that could crush a tank and a cloaking drone laced with EMP mines. Sol just laughed and said, "So the plan is madness." Arden smiled. It always was. As they neared orbit, the ship's hull dimmed until it matched space itself. A true ghost ship. The Hollow Star dipped under radar, avoided patrols, and entered Kelzer Prime's atmosphere undetected. The translator began to panic when they realized they were heading straight into the lower tiers of the city, a slum sector filled with mercenaries and weapon dealers. Arden told him this was an assassination. It was a message. They landed silently. Arden disembarked alone, no backup, no radio. He walked through the Undercity unchallenged until someone recognized the armor. Screams erupted, mercs scattered. Arden kept walking toward the fortress in the heart of the city, toward the general who thought peacekeepers made good public theater. Arden had no interest in ceremony, no interest in negotiations. He wasn't there for talk. He was there to end the laughing. The fortress loomed over the Undercity, like a rotten tooth in the skyline, jagged and oppressive, wrapped in neon advertisements for victory tours and war memorabilia. Inside, General Voth reclined on a raised platform, basking in the cheers of sycophants. Alien dignitaries sipped fermented gases from glowing tubes, while banners of the Triform Accord fluttered across the ceiling. Security was tight. Plasma turrets, Neurod guards, a small battalion of bioclone warriors patrolling the halls. Voth didn't fear Earth. He had turned the slaughter of Earth's peacekeepers into a holiday. He'd even named a stadium after it. He called it Remembrance of Ash. Arden called it something else, a target. He entered through the maintenance ducts, bypassing biometric locks with physical tools, not digital keys. Old-fashioned metal snapped and popped as he rewired vent circuits, navigating like he'd built the place himself. Modern tech couldn't trace him. He was a ghost in a digital world. When he emerged from the shadows of the utility chamber beneath the main hall, the party was in full swing. Music pounded. Voth raised a gobble high and made another joke about Earth's soft hearts and softer spines. The crowd laughed. Arden was already behind the main generator. He disabled the lights first, not all at once, one flicker at a time. Shadows crept across the room until only the stage remained illuminated. Then came the silence. It wasn't forced. It spread like a virus. Guests looked around. Even the music system paused mid-beat. Voth frowned and signaled to his guards. That's when Arden stepped forward, face hidden beneath his combat helm, armor scraped and humming with energy. Voth blinked once slowly, as if trying to confirm that the figure approaching wasn't a hologram or a trick. But it wasn't a trick. It was a warning. Too late. The guards reacted first, opening fire with stun lances. The beams reflected harmlessly off Arden's chestplate. He moved like a machine, silent, surgical, savage. The first two guards were down before their bodies registered pain. The third tried to retreat, but met Arden's elbow and crumpled. Voth screamed for lockdown, but the doors were jammed. Arden's drone, released moments earlier, was already interfacing with the security system, feeding false data and delaying any alerts. He didn't need long. He didn't charge the stage. He walked slow, deliberate. Voth pulled a ceremonial blade from his hip and pointed it forward, trying to summon authority with his posture. Arden didn't speak. He stepped onto the stage, ignored the alien dignitaries scattering like insects, and kept walking. Voth lashed out. Arden caught the blade mid-swing, twisted it out of the general's grip, and held it up. Then he shattered it with one hand. Voth snarled and launched a desperation punch. Arden sidestepped, caught the general by the collar, and drove him into the wall with enough force to crack the metal behind him. Screams echoed across the hall. Arden didn't kill him yet. Instead, he activated his armor's voice relay and said 3 words, "This is justice." Then he pulled out a hollow projector and replayed the footage of Earth's peacekeepers burning, this time from Voth's personal archives. The crowd watched horrified. They hadn't seen the real footage, just edited propaganda. Now they saw the screams, the blood, the laughing, the betrayal. Arden let it loop, once more, then turned to Voth, still pinned. He dragged him off the stage and through the hall, letting every guest see the face of a general who murdered diplomats. Voth pleaded now. He called for mercy. He claimed politics. Arden didn't answer. He took him to the open balcony overlooking the city. Broadcast towers blinked in the distance. Arden threw Voth to his knees, activated a signal override, and spoke directly into the comm grid. To every world listening, he said, "This is the first. This is for the peacekeepers." He didn't need to say more. Voth's scream was brief. Arden threw him over the edge. The body hit a supply tram 3 stories below, crashing through its roof. The crowd inside scattered. The city went quiet. Back aboard the Hollow Star, the crew watched the transmission unfold. The translator paled. Sol whistled. The AI noted that 12 interstellar systems were now scanning for Arden's ship. His response? He ordered a course change. No return, not yet. There were still 2 generals left. The ones who watched the executions and didn't stop them. The ones who smiled. News of Voth's death ignited chaos. The Triform Accord held an emergency meeting and issued a galactic warrant for Arden Pierce, labeling him a terrorist. Earth's parliament doubled down on disavowing him. They called him unsanctioned, reckless, and rogue. Protesters on Earth called him something else. The Relic, the Avenger. Children started drawing his image. Soldiers began modifying their armor in tribute. A resistance began to swell, not just on Earth but across colonies under alien rule. Civilians across the galaxy had watched peacekeepers burn and done nothing. Now they watched one man burn the killers in return. It was terrifying, and it was working. In deep space, Arden meditated in the ship's gravity chamber, his weapons disassembled before him, hands moving with a calm rhythm. He wasn't celebrating. He wasn't enjoying it. Each move was deliberate, part of a code drilled into him before the world had laws for space warfare. His crewmates didn't disturb him. They knew better. The translator, however, approached quietly and asked a question no one had dared voice. "How far are you planning to go?" Arden didn't look up. He said only this: as far as they did, and they had gone too far. The next general, Darth Vass, was based on a diplomatic cruiser traveling between trade worlds. He was more careful, more politically savvy. Arden knew a frontal attack wouldn't work, so he changed the game. Instead of targeting Voss directly, he sent evidence, proof of Voss's involvement in the executions, to neutral star systems. He leaked intercepted transmissions, secret logs, holograms of meetings where Voss laughed while Earth's envoys burned. One by one, Voss's allies fell away. One by one, his supply routes dried up. Arden never fired a shot, but the damage was done. Voss's cruiser was refused docking. His fleet was denied access. His allies turned cold. When Arden finally caught up to him, it wasn't on a battlefield. It was aboard a refugee vessel where Voss had disguised himself as a medic. Arden didn't need scanners. He walked past every room until he found the one with fear in it. Voss looked up from behind a fake ID and froze. Arden raised his weapon but didn't fire. He stared at him for a long moment. Then he said, "You're not worth a bullet. You're worth the truth." He tied Voss to the bridge, activated the comms, and broadcasted the files again, this time with Voss forced to confess in front of survivors. By the time Arden was done, Voss was crying, begging not for life, for obscurity. Arden left him alive, but with a name no one would forget and a face too shameful for power. Again, he wasn't just killing generals. He was dismantling legacies, and one still remained. The final general was not hiding. General Croy had never hidden. He was the one who orchestrated the live broadcast of Earth's peacekeepers burning, and he wore that act like a medal. He didn't flee or go into diplomatic hiding like the others. He built a monument from the ashes of Earth's ambassadors on a floating war station known as Sovereign Halo. It orbited a dead sun in unclaimed space, bristling with every known defense system and surrounded by a fleet that outgunned most planetary militaries. Croy had made it the new capital of the Triform Accord. He wanted Arden to come. He dared him, publicly, mockingly. Broadcasts rang out every hour across the Outer Rim. "I am the end of your spine," he said. "Your relic cannot touch me." On board the Hollow Star, Arden said nothing for hours. He stood before the projection of Sovereign Halo and watched the fleet rotation patterns. His crew stayed silent, knowing better than to interrupt. Sol leaned back against the reactor bulkhead, watching him with narrowed eyes. She finally broke the silence, saying, "It's a fortress wrapped in a fleet wrapped in a death wish." Arden finally turned. "Then let's make a wish." The approach was brutal. Dozens of patrols scanned the void beyond Sovereign Halo. The Hollow Star had cloaking capabilities, but not for that level of surveillance. Arden didn't care. He sent in a decoy vessel first, rigged with fusion scramblers and a voice loop of his own war log from 2 centuries ago. It was flagged and destroyed instantly, triggering an alert that sent half the fleet chasing shadows across the system, that left the other half still dangerous, still lethal, but vulnerable to stealth infiltration. Arden had one shot to land, and he didn't plan to leave. He suited up, not in ceremonial armor, in silence. The old plates, once black, were now scratch silver. They hummed faintly with charge. His dog tags were still there, and he held them for a long time before stepping into the drop pod. The plan was madness. It had no extraction window. The crew didn't try to stop him. The translator simply asked, "Why not wait? Why not regroup?" Arden looked down at the floor for a moment, then replied, "Because he's not waiting either. He's already preparing the next fire." The pod launched with a sonic crack and burned to the upper defenses with a blinding tail of energy. Alarms screamed across Sovereign Halo. Fighters scrambled, turrets locked on, but the pod twisted, shifted, split midair, ejecting a swarm of flares and reflective decoys. Arden launched from the burst, cutting through the lower gravity in a controlled fall, and slammed into the side of the station with a magnetic grip. He moved like a shadow of vengeance, slipping through corridors while the enemy chased phantoms in space. His goal wasn't the main command bridge. It was the auditorium. Croy had set up a victory ceremony that day. Hundreds of alien officials sat beneath a massive stained glass view pane, showing the execution of Earth's peacekeepers. It played on a loop behind him like a sick religious icon. He stood at a podium, preaching a galactic dominance of peace through obedience. He said Earth was a lesson in weakness. And then the lights went out. Not all of them, just enough. The shadows crept in first, and the main view pane shattered from within as Arden burst through it, armored and silent, a walking myth now made real. Glass rained down on the assembly. Croy didn't even flinch. He grinned. "You came, Relic. I was hoping for a better entrance." Arden didn't answer. He drew a blade older than the war station itself and hurled it at the central power column. Sparks exploded. The chamber went red. Croy pulled a plasma whip from his back and descended from the platform with theatrical steps. The crowd scattered. The guards rushed in, firing. Arden moved through them like wind through leaves, every strike ending a body, every movement clean and merciless. Blood hit the walls. The screams didn't slow him. They focused him. Croy didn't flee. He waited at the base of the altar, whip glowing, confidence unshaken. Arden stopped a few feet from him. 2 soldiers lunged between them, and Croy struck them down himself, laughing. You think you're justice? You're a fossil clinging to an empire that chose to kneel. Arden stepped forward. I'm not justice. I'm your last mistake. They collided like titans. The whip lashed and scorched across Arden's arm. He didn't flinch. He caught it mid-strike, reeled Croy in and drove his forehead into the general's faceplate. Cracking it, Croy stumbled back, roared and activated a grav field generator, pinning Arden against the wall. You're too late, he growled. The next peacekeepers are already dead. This is just a show. Arden looked up, blood trailing from his brow. Then let's end the show. With a surge of energy from his suit's backup capacitors, he shattered the gravity hold and launched himself at Croy, tackling him into the altar. The whip fell away. The 2 crashed into the central D's, sparks flying, stone crumbling. Arden rained down fists like thunder, armored knuckles cracking reinforced bone. Croy bellowed, activating a fail-safe that detonated the lower floor. The entire chamber began to collapse. Arden pulled him from the wreckage by the throat. Croy, gasping, bleeding, still laughed. You can't kill an idea, Earthling. You can't erase the fear. Arden leaned close. No, but I can erase you. And he did. One final strike. Quick, brutal, unceremonious. The body dropped. The room fell silent. But he didn't flee. He activated the station's main broadcast tower and fed the live stream directly to the Galactic Assembly. He stood there, bloodied and breathing heavily, over the corpse of Croy. Behind him, the shattered mural, the false legacy, crumbled. He said nothing at first, just stared into the lens, into every screen across the galaxy. Then finally he spoke. You mocked our peace. You celebrated their deaths. You thought we would kneel. But Earth remembers. We remember who we were before your lies, before your fires. We don't burn quietly. He ended the stream, dropped the transmitter, and collapsed to one knee. The floor beneath him cracked, and the station trembled. Explosions began to ripple from the lower sectors. The sabotage was working. Sovereign Halo was dying. The hollow star pierced the clouds above, engines roaring. Against all odds, Sol had overridden the blockades and punched through orbit. They had come back. Arden's beacon flashed once. Extraction initiated. As the station began to implode, his crew opened the ramp. He dragged himself to the edge, one hand clinging to a cable. Sol reached for him. He locked eyes with her and said, Did I get them all? She nodded, every last one. Then let's go home. The hollow star broke atmosphere, trailing smoke and burning fragments from the collapsing station behind it. The crew inside said nothing, not a word. The fireball that had once been Sovereign Halo lit up the void like a dying star, and Arden stood at the rear of the ship, gripping the safety rail as if it might pull him back in. His armor was dented, half charred, one gauntlet missing. Blood had dried along the edge of his temple. He didn't wipe it away. He just stared out the implosion and waited until the last spark vanished before finally speaking. Tell Earth it's done. But it wasn't really over, not in the way people imagined. Back on Earth, news of Croy's death and the destruction of the Accord's capital exploded across every broadcast. Governments tried to downplay it. Assemblies issued cautious statements. Neutral systems urged restraint. But the people didn't wait. Protests turned into celebrations. Tributes filled the streets. Murals of Arden, half-helmeted and towering over the stars, appeared on colony walls. Kids wore old Earth combat jackets with makeshift dog tags. Soldiers from Systems Earth had never even defended began sending encrypted messages to Arden's crew. They wanted to learn. They wanted to fight. Not just for Earth, for something bigger. For truth, for the ones no one avenged. The unified Parliament couldn't ignore it anymore. Not after footage of Arden's speech broadcasted from the wreck of Sovereign Halo was replayed 1 billion times across 1,000 worlds. The chairwoman who once mocked his reactivation now demanded a medal be issued in his honor. But Arden didn't respond. He didn't return to Earth for a parade or applause. He stayed in orbit aboard the Hollow Star, repairing his armor piece by piece, sometimes in silence, sometimes with a faint hum of music playing in the background. Not military anthems, old Earth songs, songs from before the wars, before the stars. Sol found him there late one night, sitting beside a sealed crate marked with an Earth War crest no one had used in centuries. She asked what was inside. He told her it was his file, the original, the one the council buried along with him. She asked if he ever wanted it opened. He said no. The past didn't need rewriting. It needed closure. She asked if he felt closure. He didn't answer. The translator brought word from the outer colonies. Systems that once bowed to the Accord were now rejecting their authority. New governments were rising, some formed by the very people who once feared Arden's name. Point One colony burned to ash during the early days of the Accord had built a statue of the fallen peacekeepers with Arden's message carved beneath it. We do not burn quietly. It had become a rallying cry, not just for Earth, for anyone watching the stars who'd once been told to sit down, shut up, and accept their place. Despite all this, Arden remained distant, detached. He reviewed missions alone. He maintained distant from the crew, always polite, always efficient, never emotional. But even the crew knew he was breaking slowly from the inside. Sol said it best one night, when they were rerouting their return path. He didn't go out there to win. He went to balance a scale he knew he'd never see level. The Hollow Star eventually received a personal transmission, not from Parliament, not from the Assembly, from a child. A simple message recorded on a colony station, with poor lighting and no edits. The boy was no older than 8. He stood holding a piece of scrap metal shaped like a badge and said, "My dad said you stopped him from killing people who couldn't fight. I'm going to be like you." The message ended. Arden watched it 4 times. On the 5th, he took off his armor and walked out into the ship's main corridor barefoot, a rare sight for someone who had always moved like the floor might explode beneath him. He didn't say anything, but that night the lights in the ship's memorial bay turned on for the first time. They returned to Earth in silence. No escort, no cameras, no fanfare. Arden walked off the ship alone and declined every official invitation to speak. He simply handed a small metal box to the head of Parliament. Inside was Votha's blade, cracked down the center, and Croy's whip handle scorched beyond function. Artifact of tyranny broken by truth. When asked if he wanted to attend the ceremony in his honor, Arden asked if any of the peacekeepers' families would be there. They said no. Then he said he wouldn't be there. Instead, he visited a field just outside of Geneva on Earth's old soil. A cemetery had been erected for the fallen envoys. No bodies had been recovered, only names etched in silver stone. Arden walked to the markers until he found one name, Ambassador Leander Halt. She had once offended him in court 200 years ago when Earth debated whether to cryo-seal him or kill him. He stood in front of her stone for a long time, then placed his tags beneath it. Not all of them, just one, the last one, the one he had carved himself before taking off for the final mission. Sol found him there an hour later and said nothing. She just sat beside him. That was the last time anyone saw him publicly. Years passed. The Hollow Star became a museum. Its walls were left as is, burn marks and blade scratches preserved under glass. His armor was never recovered. The tags were never moved. In the decade that followed, Earth built a monument, not in the capital, not in the city, in orbit. A space-borne ring inscribed with the names of peacekeepers, not soldiers. It was said that if you walked the ring from one side to the other, you'd find a single blank panel at the end, left untouched, waiting for another name. Not a hero's name, just a warning. And somewhere in deep space, when colonies found themselves under threat and fires began to rise again, there were whispers of an old ship flickering on the edge of scanners, of a man in worn armor with no rank and no insignia, a man who never asked for loyalty, only silence, only purpose.